Welcome to the second edition of SaaSQ. Those of you who are joining us for the first time at a Canaan event, we are an early stage venture firm focused on Series A and B. Over the last 30 years, we have been fortunate enough to back some very iconic companies. And over the next 30 years, we hope to contribute more into the startup ecosystem. And I'm a partner here. My name is Joydeep Bhattacharyya. I focus on enterprise SaaS and security. We have none other than Jyoti Bansal here with us. And before we move into the introduction of Jyoti, just a refresher on SaaSQ. So how many of you are entrepreneur, aspiring entrepreneur, executive at startups or related to the startup ecosystem? Yeah, that's a lot of you guys, right?
Everyone, yeah.
So this is really for you guys. This is for the community. SaaSQ, we designed SaaSQ to facilitate folks like Jyoti to give back to the community and to really help the next generation go up to the heights that he and other people like him has achieved. So feel free to pose questions. We're going to have this as a very interactive session. We're going to probably hold off onto the questions for the first 15 to 20 minutes, and then we're going to open it up. So we'll have a good Q&A session, and we are also going to be recording this. So this is going to be available online at the Canaan website and our YouTube channel. So with that, Jyoti, so I'd be very honest. So Jyoti, I was preparing this introduction about Jyoti, about the founding CEO of AppDynamics, and I was going to talk about that. And then yesterday, he surprised all of us by launching his new startup in his new incubator. So he's probably much better person to talk about that.
Okay.
And just explain what you're up to.
All right. I'm here primarily to share my experiences with the group here, because I know it's always hard to talk to people, to ask questions on startups, entrepreneurship, all sort of things like that. But I'll go very quickly with what I announced. For me, so AppDynamics was bought earlier this year, and at some point I was that I need to do something that I am very passionate about, which is solving problems, building more products, building more teams, things like that, right? So I started Big Labs, which is like think of it's like a lab where we go and research on interesting problems. You can think of like it's the way there will be labs at Google Labs. You just find interesting problems and you research on them. And some problems you don't find interesting enough solutions, or they're not just interesting enough after some research. And some problems are, and if they are, then we go and spin out as companies. And we look for interesting. We have a list of ongoing things that we want to go and evaluate, and we look for people to come in and become a part of it. Help running those experiments, find the product market fit, build the technology, something like that. And if something works well, then we will spin it out. So Harness is the first company that we launched out of Big Labs, which Harness is it's going after the problem of how do we simplify software delivery. And everyone just struggles with software delivery everywhere. Everyone who's in engineering talks about DevOps and delivery and continuous delivery, and it's just a painful thing. And I just wanted to go after the problem to see if can we just simplify this for everyone. That is simple, automatic, easy. And so Harness is about building continuous delivery as a service. So it's the product just came out of stealth. It's a very small team in its early access.
Great. Well, the VC inside me wants to ask a lot more questions on Harness, but that's for another day, another time.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we are going to dive deep into your experience in starting AppD, right? And one of the very interesting facets of your experience is that you're a true outsider. You're not just outsider to Silicon Valley, outsider to the country. Mm-hmm. You came here and then started the company. So let's rewind back, right? Let's rewind back to your engineering days. You went to a really good school in India. What really motivated you? How did you end up in Silicon Valley in the first days?
Sure. Well, so when I was going to school in India, I was always fascinated by startups. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so I graduated in 1999. And the startup scene in India wasn't very good at that time. It's not like now there are many startups. So to me, it was very clear that Silicon Valley is the place to be if I want to be starting my own company at some point. I want to be more immersed in the startup scene. And it was a very strange thing to do for most students coming out of school, because mostly you will come out here for a master's program or a PhD program, and then you will go to school, and then you will start working in the industry. To me, it's like, I really don't want to go to academics anymore because if I want to run business and want to do startups, or at least that's what I'm most fascinated about, so why not just try that? So I started just fresh out of school, I started just applying for startups, for a job in startups here. And the way I look at some of these is like, it's kind of like sales, right? It's a numbers game. You apply to 50, you will eventually get into one. So that's how I got into one startup, which was a 15% startup here. That's when I came here into Silicon Valley.
How did you even find that 15% startup sitting in India? Just Google?
I figured out how to Google and how to. Some of them were also like you have to connect with some other people who can also tell you some other startups.
Just by Googling, getting into, you have to build those networks, right?
Yeah.
Great. So you arrived here, and when was the first thought of actually doing something on your own? When did that happen?
So as I said, I always wanted to do something on my own, but I wanted to work in startups and learn. And maybe at some point when I'm very excited about something, I would have done something. So I worked in 3 different startups. And it's just a lot of learning in working in startups. I encourage every founder, every entrepreneur, just work in startups before you want to start something. I didn't want to work in startups. I wanted to start, but I ended up working, and it was a great experience. So I worked in 3 startups, and it's 3 different kind of learnings. My first startup was a company founded by 3 PhDs from MIT, and it was building what Hadoop is now, but it was back in 2000. And really, really great technology, great product, but no way to sell to anyone. There was no customer, nothing, right? So and then it was acqui-hired into somewhere. So it was a lesson learned. To me, the lesson learned was don't build anything that no one is going to buy, because it's still the same amount of work, but it's very painful that no one is buying it. So the second startup I went to was doing data mining for manufacturing companies, kind of thing. A little bit more successful, but they kind of built the initial product, but then they just suddenly plateaued. And my lesson learned was a startup always have to keep evolving, because the markets will change, the competitive landscape will change, competitors will learn, and all that stuff happens. And if you don't evolve, if your culture in startup is not about evolving and adapting, then you not work. So that was my second lesson. The third startup I worked with, so this startup was acquired by Rockwell Automation, maybe $20-30 million, something like that. My third startup was a company called Wiley, we are doing kind of selling to IT, software monitoring systems, etc. It was acquired by CA, Computer Associates. And you learn there as well, a lot of lessons you learn, when the company is more successful, you learn, when it's not successful, you learn. So it was a great learning experience. Along those, those working in those 3 startups for 7 years, I had at least 3 or 4 times that strong desire or burn of solving some problem. Most startups start with as a founder, you start someone needs to solve this problem, and this problem is not solved, and you want to why don't I go and start a company to solve this problem, right? So I had that at least 3 or 4 times, and I would have started something, maybe not AppDynamics, not solving the problem exactly what we're doing AppDynamics, but maybe something similar or some other problem. But I was restricted by my immigration status. So I was on H-1B visa, and I've talked about it that it doesn't make any sense for us in Silicon Valley or us as a country that for someone wants to start a company and create jobs, that you make it hard for them. So it just doesn't make any sense doesn't matter what your political inclination is, doesn't make any sense. But you can't. If you are on H-1 visa, you may be coming from the top engineering school in India, or some other country, you are on H-1 here, you're working in Google, and you have some idea that you want to start. VCs are willing to fund you to start that, but you can't do it because you're restricted by doing it. That, to me, is completely nonsense.
I have some horror stories myself. So I don't know. Probably not a lot of you need to know this, but there is a stage before you get to permanent residency. You have this EAD, which is your employment authorization, and then you have this AP. It's called advanced parole.
Yeah.
It is a status when you actually don't have a visa. This is this piece of paper which you can lose anytime, and then if you lose it, then you're done. You just cannot enter. Even if you have it, you show up in the airport, and they're just going to not stamp anything. They're going to send you to this small cell. It looks like really a prison cell. And there are like 5 officers, grumpy officers. They're going to sit you for like 2 hours. You're smiling, so I think you have all gone through this. It's crazy. And you had to do it for the year or 2 years that you have that before your green card. So bottom line is I agree with you. We need to work on it. So.
Yeah, no, we have to. To me, it's like, we have to make it easier for, if you are coming here as a high-skilled immigrant to this country, and it's great, like the biggest advantage Silicon Valley has, and people all over the world, like, I go to places, people say, what's special about Silicon Valley? It's because, the talented people from all over the world are coming here. That's the most special thing. That's the competitive advantage. And if you make it hard for them to do, the most special things they want to do, then they would go somewhere else, or they would not come here. And that's the competitive advantage will start to slowly go away. So that's something as a country we gotta fix.
Great. So you got your green card. You knew you wanted to start a company. How did you go about? Did you think about VC funding? Because you still needed to. I'm guessing you were an engineer at the time, and starting a company, you still needed to kind of get through that connection. How did you go about pitching to investors, finding investors, getting to because I'm just asking on behalf of everyone here, because the main question is how do you build your network here and pitch to the right people?
Yeah. This was 2007 or so, and I was kind of burning with that there is this problem that needs to be solved, that everyone is building these complex applications, and there is no way to figure out when something goes wrong. That it has to be easy for someone to monitor these, troubleshoot these, fix problems, right? And so I was like, okay, no one is doing it, I should try to do it myself. And I didn't know many VCs, right? So I was an engineer, I didn't have a network of VCs. I actually even, I still remember, like, I started doing the search. Someone asked me, like, have you got a term sheet? I was like, what is a term sheet? I didn't even, it was so strange that just even the word term sheet I never heard before. But what you do is, like, first of all, there are a lot of resources online. You can go and try to do that, right? But you slowly start to find people who can, like, where you will pitch what you're doing. Normally you don't have to worry about, like, someone will steal your idea, because it's not about the idea, it's about the execution, someone believing in you and all, right? So you have to do a lot of it. If you don't have the right network, the right connections, you just have to do a lot of them. And you have to find the right investors, maybe through someone. You can't go, like, just send a cold email to an investor. So I started finding people, who would have, ears into, say, some other investors, right? So one person I connected to that time was, he was professor at Stanford, Professor Rajiv Motwani. He was advisor to many startups and was very connected in there. And I was able to meet with him, and he was, he said he really liked what I was doing. He really liked the problem, and then it connected me to a few VCs. It was interesting. One of the partners, your partner here, her husband was my lawyer. I talked to some law firms, and he, as a lawyer, connected me to a few investors. So there are many ways, like, you can find, like, lawyers who work with venture firms. They can connect you. They can connect you. You can go with other people, but you have to be scrappy. You have to be scrappy. Like, you can't be. It's all possible. Like, the investors are there looking for founders. So it's not like, it's really just you have to take the initiative and try it, right? Why not? And it's not that hard to get venture meetings. If your idea is anything reasonable and your background seems like, you would be the right kind of person to do that idea, right? So it's, you will get venture meetings if you're scrappy enough. In my experience, what happens after that? Do you get someone to invest in you is a different story, but people will get meetings. People will take meetings.
So I think the lesson there is it's basically persistence, and then I'm guessing that's what you said is Silicon Valley has this paid forward kind of a culture where people are going to help you.
I totally agree. People will, if you reach out to people, if you, in some way where you want, like, very concrete help, is very crisp, it's like, it makes sense what you're talking about, people will help, people want to help in there. People help me as well, like, get started. I found people like, that Professor Motwani, for example, he helped me. There were other people who helped me. And so Silicon Valley works like that. So it's actually not, you have to go and ask for help, and people will help. it does take a lot of persistence after that also. Like, you will get rejections, and you will get, I have met entrepreneurs who are starting, and they get, say, 2 or 3 rejections, and they get completely demoralized. And I tell them it's actually very reasonable to be demoralized. Like, you're so enthusiastic about something, and you go to investors, and investors saying like, no, this is completely nonsense, right? But you can't get demoralized fast enough. You have to adapt.
Yeah.
Like, it's like one thing I learned was, like, when people started saying no to me, I was like, can I try to figure out why are they saying no? What is not there? And some investors will tell you why they're saying no, some investors won't. But at least I will try to find, like, okay, instead of me getting demoralized, let me try to find why is someone saying no? And something may be wrong in my message, something wrong in how I'm articulating it, how I'm describing the differentiator on the technology or on the market size or team or whatnot, whatever it is, right? And you adapt, and you may get there, right?
Great. And then I want to stress on the point on the psychological demoralization, right? Your case was very interesting. Being a first-time entrepreneur, you did it by yourself. Like, you didn't have a co-founder. What are you, having done that, what are your thoughts on finding a co-founder? Because at some level, other than different job functions, co-founder is also your kind of confidant, right?
No. I would say, I would strongly encourage that if you can get the right co-founder, have a co-founder. It makes it much easier. The life gets much easier. Like, I just started new company, Harness. I have a co-founder. I didn't need to have a co-founder necessarily, but it's so much easier to have a partner to do that, right? At the same time, like, I would say also, if you don't find the right person, you don't necessarily have to wait. Like, because things do move, right? The market is moving, the problem you're trying to solve is moving, everything is moving.
Yep.
So you just have to keep moving. So in the AppDynamics case, it just happened, like, things happened fast, and things just moved. But after that, when the first person I hired, he's our CTO now at AppDynamics, and he, even though he was not co-founder, he kind of almost grew to be as close confidant as a co-founder, because you need someone. As a founder, you always need someone you can work as a close partner, right?
Yeah, I think it gets overlooked very often, the importance of having that confidant in this journey, because this can be a very lonely journey. All right, so you got the term sheet, you got the round closed, you got the money in. Now, what do? I know AppDynamics was a very product.
For me, it was, I still remember, like, I got $5.5 million in the bank, and it was just me. And that feeling was probably the most scary feeling even before starting it. It's like, I now have the money, suddenly what do I do now? And you feel the responsibility, the pressure now. That's a very lonely moment.
How did you then go about, what was your first, was product and team and engineering your kind of first hires, and building the product your first?
It has to be, like, you are building the product. Building the product is the only thing that matters at that point, right? And so you have to bring the engineers, so the two things that matter is, like, building the product and making sure you're building the right product, right? So finding that the product market fit. So I started hiring engineers and building out the product. But at the same time, the goal I set is, like, we got to find 2 customers every week to talk to. It doesn't matter what stage we are in, and how that's our goal, that we have to find 2 people to talk to. And 2 were, like, initially when we are talking, we'll just show them some slides and say, okay, what do you think? Then we'll start showing them some prototypes, and then we start showing them, like, do you want to do alpha? Then you want to do beta. And then we increase the number from 2 to 3 to 4 every week that we wanted to talk to. So while we were building the product, the only thing we had was, like, we want someone to talk to. I actually made a hiring mistake there, which was, like, actually my employee number 3, which was I had a product manager who was a very good product manager, but he came from a larger company. And what I gave him the job, like, find me customers to talk to, so you are the voice of the customer, like what a product manager would be. And what I realized was that's not the right person. No, if you want someone who's more of a salesperson, really, like a very creative salesperson who will go on LinkedIn and do cold calls and find you those 2-3 people to talk to. Most of the time, the founders have to do the conversation themselves. But the harder skill is to find those few people to talk to. Right. And you want someone who's, like, kind of scrappy and a bit salesy about finding those people. That was then we made a change and brought someone who was actually more of a salesperson to come in and start setting up these customer conversations for us.
Right. So basically, what I'm hearing from you is customer empathy, and like that's the most important in the initial few days. So then you got the product done. What stage did you hire sales and marketing? Started to build out that organization.
Well, when you feel your product is mostly ready, that there's some set of customers that are willing to buy, and you have you have identified a broader enough market that it's like you can sell beyond those early customers as well, right? So it's everyone talks about the product market fit concept. It's you have some. You can see some product market fit. And the product market fit, I define it very simply, which is like, do you have customers who are willing to buy? And can you find many more customers like those based on what you have done? So that you have a reasonable product market fit at that time, right?
Yeah.
So that's the point where you have to launch out your company, you have to find more demand, you have to hire sales and marketing. Since I was doing it first time at AppDynamics, I didn't understand sales too much. So, some people do you hire sales reps instead of hiring a sales VP of sales. In my case, I don't understand it too much, so I should hire someone who knows this well. So I ended up hiring a VP of sales so that I could learn from the person instead of trying to manage it myself and stumble on what I don't know, right? So so I hired a VP of sales and a VP of marketing who could help me do the marketing and do the VP of sales as soon as the product market fit was ready.
And what about customer success? When did you start thinking about customer success?
You start thinking about customer success very early
Day one, right?
The day one. It's when do you start? Initially, the customer success could be done by engineers. And actually, I do believe that it should be done by engineers. Because you don't want engineers, your developers, to be too far removed from the customer. You have to iterate so fast and you have to move so fast. And if you put too much, and you have a handful of customers anyways initially, right? And what you want is you pick 5-10 customers and you want to iterate very, very fast to make them successful. If you bring a layer in between, it just slows you down.
Yeah.
So initially we did customer success with engineers, with developers, and at some point when the scale starts getting bigger and bigger, that you have many customers and you can't keep up on the engineering side, then you start building out a customer success team. And that's the model worked for us, and that's I would, if I have to do it again, I would do a similar thing.
Right. So the flywheel is running. You got your team in place, the early team in place. You're making revenue. At what stage you really figured out you have escape velocity? A lot of, to your earlier point, you were in a startup where things went on and then it plateaued, right? But in AppD's case, at some point, there is an inflection. When did that happen? What made you realize that? What was the aha moment?
Well, so it's kind of these cycles of a company, right? So I would say the $0 to $2-3 million ARR is a completely unknown product market fit kind of stage, right? You have a thesis, you have a product, maybe you think you have product market fit, but that selling is just proving that the problem really exists, the market really exists, your product really will solve it, something, right? So that to me is the phase one. You're still not sure what's going to happen. The phase two is once you have seen it, then you have to start can you have a scalable go-to-market model around it? So sales and marketing and can you effectively compete in this market? And if you nail that, you will get to you will hit the 10 million, 10, 15 million kind of ARR. It's really only after that if you can hit that at high velocity and you can start seeing that that you can take the go-to-market model and scale, you can take the product and scale, you can take the market demand, you will have much better understanding of the demand, the competitive dynamic. So only once we start hitting that when we were at 10 million or so, it was very clear to me that market is, or my assumptions were, let's say, more validated, that the size of the market, our product's advantages, our go-to-market model, and to me, it's that up to 10 million is still you're figuring many of these things out. Once you figure it out, you just want to press the gas hard after that. It's just execution. So around that, I was very confident about 10 million or so that we can press the gas hard as fast as we can to grow from there to 100 million. Because the market is there and our product is ready and our go-to-market is working. And it's a very different phase now. Now it's a little less about experimentation. It's more about just executing at scale.
Yeah.
And so that's you change how you operate in that model.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one question that I've seen a lot of these growth stage companies when they're at 15 million going to 30, and there are a few different questions, right? One, how much should I invest in direct sales? And then there is channel sales. And then there is this whole investing in product and adding more product footprint so that you can charge more, increase the prices. How did you balance all three of these? Because these is very important, right, at this stage?
You know, the real answer is you have to do all of them. You have to. It's just about the timing of things. Like, when do you time them? You don't want you know, it depends on what space you are in. Like the space we were in AppDynamics, we are selling complex software to IT, and it's selling into large enterprise. Direct sales, it was very clear to me that direct sales is the primary way that we have to nail. We tried all sort of channels, all sort of partners. We realized, like, unless we figure out how to sell it, how can we teach someone else to sell our product? So to me, it's like, you know, channel was more or less waste of time when we were smaller. Because anyone who wants to sell our product, or like a channel that we would want to work with, for them we were too small for us to take seriously. The only company who were interested in working were smaller than us, which were not too useful for us. So the channel only started to like, you know, take off when we hit like much higher scale, $70-80 million.
Okay.
Before that, I do think channel it's not too much use of time.
Even at 30-40, it's not.
It could. You have to start investing in it a bit. But I do think, like, for companies like ours, the channel.
Don't plan for it.
Yes,
is what you're saying.
Direct sales is in your control. You control your destiny. So to me, I believe, like, direct sales, if you can nail it, you have to nail it anyways. To me, channel is the cherry on the top, and direct sales is what you manage and you control, and you know what you can do. You can tune it. You can do whatever, right? So that's on that channel part, right? Expanding the product, you have to look. The way I always look at it, like, you know, I have to look 2 years ahead. So if my number is 10 million this year, and I want to do 30 million, 25 million the year after, and I want to do 40 million or 50 million the year after, can our product, the way it is right now, can it sustain that, you know, that? And the way you do the math, like, what do we look like at 50 million? Do we, like, say, if our current ASP right now is 50,000, you know, your customers paying $50,000 a year, can we get to 50 million with customers still paying $50,000 a year, or we need to go from 50 to 80? If you model that, you will know, like, you have to go to, like, you can't acquire enough customers. You have to go and increase the ASP, and you have to start adding to it. So the product development decisions on, like, what do we want to build, I always looked at, like, you know, can our product sustain the revenue we want to have 2 years from now? And 2 years is not too far, but it's still quite far. But it takes 2 years if you want to build a new product, and for it to start generating any kind of business will take 2 years. Right?
Great, awesome. So one question. So on one side your revenue is growing, and on the other side your team is growing, right? I mean, you're hiring. How important is the culture and preserving the culture? Because I've seen a lot of stories where that can derail you, right?
No. There's nothing more important than that. Especially when you're growing fast, you know, you have so many new people coming in, right? So I remember, like, AppDynamics, we were 100 people in the company, and then that were there for say in a 4-year period, and then, like, suddenly in 6 months we're hiring another 100, right? So if you have so many new people coming in, like, you know, your culture can change heavily, right? So what you have to do is you have to put a lot of focus in maintaining what is important for you. You don't want to stop all the change, because new people are coming in with new ideas and new things that your culture can slightly evolve with, right? So you don't want to completely stop it, but you want to figure out what are the core values that you really don't want to change. Like in our case, like, some things that we were, like, just so important for us, the obsession with customer success. Our number one value in culture that we put is that customer success is everyone's job. Everyone's job in the company is to make sure customers are very successful. So whoever will come in will make sure that part we don't lose. So we had, like, a small list of values that we would make sure that we don't lose the culture. And as you are growing, you have to put a lot of deliberate effort into it. You know, I always used to say at that time, like, you know, my top 2 jobs are recruiting the best people and maintaining our culture. That if we can recruit the best people, maintain our culture, most things will figure out.
How do you enforce that? How do you enforce keeping that values while hiring?
Well, there's no one simple formula. You can't enforce while hiring. You know, some people try to do it. To me, it's like, you know, people change. People adapt the culture of the company. Some things, yes, you can, like, you know, I really don't look at too much of the cultural fit while hiring. To me, it's like, you hire someone, can you have them embrace our culture?
Yeah.
If they can't, they will be, like, you know, at AppDynamics we used to call it, like, the organizational rejection. The organization will reject them in, like, 3 to 6 months automatically. So if they don't adapt and embrace our culture. So instead of trying to find the culture fit in recruiting, I don't really believe too much into it. But it's you can have people, so people see how you operate as a company, right? So, and we were very clear, like on there, we will have like a new hire orientation. We'll talk about our culture for an hour. Like what does it mean to operate inside AppDynamics? Like, which is like, you have to be customer obsessed. You have to be collaborative about things. You have to be open to new things, and the cultural values that we have. And then you have to start setting examples around it. Like people learn, like, as a CEO, if I'm not doing those, people will not do those also. If people see me making those decisions, or like, then my exec team making the similar kind of cultural decisions, they will start doing those. See, at some scale, we even put those in our bonus plans. Like for some of the key people, we would have it like, we had a section called Culture Ambassador. Like, if you're part of their performance reviews and bonuses were based on were they our cultural ambassadors, where they had to just exhibit, okay, out of the 5-6 cultural values we have, were there examples where they were exhibiting those values? Mm-hmm. So just having that in their performance review makes you very conscious of that you want to embrace and do those cultural values. And so the way I look is like, you have to really, really focus on your company's culture, but you have to make people adapt and embrace to the culture, and most people will. Most people want to know how your company operates, and they want to operate in that way. Right?
Great, awesome, fascinating. So now I'm going to open it up for questions, and I'll be repeating some of the questions. Mm-hmm. Why don't you start?
Sure.
So the question is seed level funding or mm-hmm. pre-Series A funding.
Yeah. So I would say the timing is it was 2008, right? So 9 years ago, the way it worked versus how it works now is very different. For a B2B enterprise software kind of company, there was no seed funding at that time. Seed funding, the concept of seed funding has evolved much more now. You really had to go and do a Series A, because for products like those, they are hard to make, and then you need like, at least a team of like 8-10 engineers working for on like maybe 12 months, 18 months before you can build that product. And so you would need some capital, and that those seed funds were not that big of a deal that time. So I had to go do Series A. So I bootstrapped before it. When I was raising the round, I had options for like there were some firms who offered me like a seed round, like why don't we do a smaller round, and to me it's like, in my gut I was worried about the financial crisis. To me it's like, some kind of correction and crisis is going to happen in the next maybe 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. So I'm going to take as much money as I can. So that was
probably you raised before the crisis?
Yeah. So that was one of the best decisions I made. Like, that I raised more money than I needed, because that allowed me to survive through the 2008, 9, 10 crisis.
Was your team there at the time in May 2009 when you landed that?
The Series A,
yeah.
Just me. It was just me. It was just me, some code and some PowerPoint. It was just me.
Okay.
One-man army.
Yeah.
All right. I think. How did you think about competition?
Yeah, so it's a very good question on like how did I convince myself that we can compete with these larger giants there, right? I think the best thing that happened to that, I worked at CA for a year. And so my previous startup was acquired by CA, Computer Associates, who was a big player in that space. I worked there for a year, and it was very clear to me, like, there is no way, they can compete with a really good startup out there. So that's how I was convinced, like, it's just, everything was just so slow moving. Everything was so slow moving. Everything was so bureaucratic. Just a larger organization's inertia around things. The quality of people they were able to attract or retain and all wasn't as strong as like a good startup could. So that's why I was very confident. Like, I could do this as a startup, much better. And people would ask me, like, because at that time, say companies like CA and Oracle, I raised $5.5 million of funding. CA's budget for R&D for the APM group was $50 million for that year. And people ask me, okay, they're going to spend $50 million and you have $5 million of funding, how are you going to compete? Right? So that's where the advantage of a startup is. Like, the ability to move fast and adapt fast is a big, big advantage that the large companies don't have. The other advantage you have is also like, everyone's so passionate and aligned with the mission. It becomes a mission, right? So you build a team of 10 people, 15 people, but they're all so driven. They're all part of a mission, which is not the case in Oracle and all, where like people are doing more of only as a job in most cases, right? So it's so that makes a huge difference. Like you have like this really passionate almost like mission-driven set of 10, 15 people versus you have like, a set of like, organization, not mission-driven, people doing their job. So that makes a big difference.
Right. So one more kind of double clicking on that. So there is this big four, but there is also some of your
New big four.
Yeah, then the existing like new competition, right? How do you think about the other startups? Should you as a CEO even worry about those?
My point of view is that don't worry too much about those. You have to track, you have to look at them, you have to see who is doing what, but don't. Sometimes people obsess too much with them. We actually had a rule in the early days of AppDynamics that don't look at what competition is doing because that will influence how you want to solve the problem. So that's why we were so obsessed with talking to customers. Our rule was like our only true north should be what customers are telling us. What competitors are doing, we will chase the features they are doing and whatnot. That should not be driving our roadmap, how we solve it. It will even influence our thinking. If a customer tells us like, this is my problem, we kind of want a clean slate, at least a mindset on it. Like, what's the best way of solving it? If you're just studying the competitors too much and obsessing with them too much, you will probably come with the same solution as competitors are doing, maybe slightly better. So normally my point of view is like, you want to track them, but you really want to talk to customers and solve the problem for them and make them as a primary thing.
Great. So from this side. So culture.
Yeah.
More.
So culture on remote teams, it's a little bit harder than when culture is such a strange word, right? When your team is very small, culture is all about as a founder how you operate. People, it's like how you like to operate. How you like to reward people, how you like to promote people, how you like to, how you operate. Your operating style will become the company culture. So it's employees are remote versus not. If it's a small team, it won't really matter. It's only when the team gets larger that's when you are not involved as the founders or the founders of the company, in a lot of decisions. That's when you want to incorporate your culture more systematically. But before that, it won't make much difference in my.
When do you start talking about it verbally, saying, "Oh, we have this culture"?
When you know what it is. So it's you won't know for some time like what it is. Like you can say like this is what our culture is, but that's not how you operate, or that's not how the founders or the company operates. That's not your culture. So at some point you will know. Like in 6 months, a year, 18 months, you will know like this is how we operate. This is how we like to do things, right? And you may say, okay, this is not how we want to do things, and we'll change it. But once you change it, you say, okay, this is how our culture is now. But otherwise, like it's you can't just write up the culture and that's not say this is our culture.
So how do we find the right co-founder with the right business or technical expertise?
Well, I think the first thing starts with awareness. Like if you have the awareness that you have that gap, you find a co-founder will fill that gap with you. So and how do you go and find co-founders? You have to find people who are probably passionate about the similar kind of problem, or something you would think who would passionate about the same kind of problem. I was always very hesitant in working with a co-founder I didn't know from before, because it just makes it harder. But so you have to spend time as well. You have to spend time, and that you will have the right chemistry, right working relationship, and all sort of things like that. Mm-hmm.
How did you deal with anxiety?
There is anxiety, right? When I quit my job and started, right? The way I always look at what's the worst case. So worst case was, okay, I'm starting this. If this doesn't go anywhere, I can always find a job as a software engineer again. And probably I will maybe find a better job because I had experience of doing that for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, something, right? So to me, it's like I look at the worst case as what? Like, 6, 9 months, 12 months of trying, something that I believe in. Maybe I won't get any salary in that. I had savings for that much period at least. And then I will go and find a software engineer job. Someone will give me a job again. So that was how I mentally said, got rid of the anxiety around quitting the job and starting, right? And for me, it was just me and my wife. So from a family perspective, my responsibilities were not that, that I can't quit my job and do things like that, right? But when we are running a company, right? It's very high risk always, right? Any point of time, startup is high risk. And there is always anxiety around it, right? The anxiety also increases when you have a lot of employees because you feel the pressure and the burden of them. as in like, because you're responsible for, in some way you're responsible for them as well, right? You made promises, you kind of showed the dreams to bring a lot of people on board with you. And now you feel the pressure, like, because it's not just the, at some point, like, money personally for the founder itself won't matter too much, right? It's you just want to make sure, like, your team is taken care of, and everything right happens. So it's a lot of pressure. So it's never an easy thing to be, running a startup. Like, looks like most people are here are entrepreneurs. So that pressure you have to deal with. The way I always dealt with it is by, making sure that I'm doing the best possible. I was surrounding myself with the right kind of people. You have to understand what you don't know, and you have to surround with the right kind of people. So, like, if you don't know something, don't hesitate, then hire someone who would know it better than you. Maybe as an exec employee, that will help you. Second is, there's a lot of anxiety around decisions. Like, are you making the right decision every time, right? One thing that worked for me was like, AppDynamics had a lot of smart engineers, right? Most tech companies will have smart engineers, right? One of the things that I always use, like making sure I'm making the right decision, I will just go and talk to 5 of them. And it's just like, someone who, and it may be a completely business kind of decision as well. And I'll just go and randomly talk to them, like, I'm thinking of doing this, and this is what I'm thinking. And I realized, like, if I can't convincingly describe to a smart engineer, because they will roll their eyes if you're talking nonsense, right? Like, you're not on the right path, or you're not making. You still have to own the decision, and you have to make the decisions and all that. But you can reduce some of the anxiety, like, are you making the right kind of decisions or not, right? And then the last thing finally is, like, don't worry about things you can't control. People sometimes worry too much about, like, so my rule is, like, can we do something about it? If you can't do something about it, just out of the, why worry about something you can't do anything about?
How do you use the funds the first couple of years?
I think one of the good things that happened to me was the recession. And I knew that there is no more funding outside, because it's like 2009 and even like some part of 2010 was absolutely no funding. Funding was very hard to get, especially for our very early stage startup. So that kind of drove that I need to get to this milestone, that I have a product market fit. I gotta get this many customers and start getting some traction, so until then I have to survive with the cash I have. So that actually allowed me to make the right decisions. But the right decisions were all about, like, hire engineers and find customers to talk to and work with and close deals. So we were all engineers. There was no non-engineers except one person. There was one person who was doing kind of all our finding customers, some marketing, and I would do, as founder, I was coding and I was doing selling and, whatever it was needed to be done. But so it depends on the company, right? But I would say, like, if you have, the way I look at how to manage cash is, what do you need for your next milestone? Like, so your next milestone is raising more capital in some way, right? So, like, say, I raised $5.5 million. I need to do raise Series B at some point. What do I need for Series B? And what do I safely need for Series, like, to safely raise Series B, not in like a very, say, a frothy market, in a conservative kind of market, that I needed to have, like, to a very well-established product market fit. I have to show paying customers. I have to show, like, that the market, that my funnel and the market opportunity is large enough. I need to show that I have figured out at least some basic sales model. So we actually wrote it down, like, it was written on a whiteboard, that these are the 5 things we need. If we don't, we won't get the next round, and we'll probably die as a company. And then we just started working on, like, okay, for these 5 things, what is the way to get there? And that's kind of then roughly what I've used as a model even in future. Like, what do we need to do to show the next thing we want to achieve?
So we talked about anxiety, right? And now let's talk about this, like, this weekend or this week. What were the emotions, to the extent that you can share, right?
Sure.
So how did you think about going public and then completely changing the decision?
That was extremely high anxiety week that I can tell you. Like, for the whole week, for like in 5 nights, I slept maybe 5 hours at most. And that's how, because things were moving so fast, and things were just, we were going public. That was our plan. We even had many of our employees in New York already to ring the bell, and people had their suits ordered because they wanted to go to NASDAQ and ring the bell and all that. so we were not looking to sell. Like sometimes companies have like a dual process going on. They're looking to sell and all that. So Cisco came in and they said we want to buy you, and they made an offer. It's as board and as shareholders, you have to look at like every possible option, right? That's your fiduciary responsibility. You have to look at it seriously. So, I think I can talk about that, at least that. We said no to the first offer. They came back with a second offer we said no to, and then they came back with a third offer which made sense to not say no to from shareholder fiduciary responsibility and all. So it's like you have to, in many of those things, you have to do what's right? It's not just for the management team or even the investors. You have so many stakeholders. So what was the right thing for your employees? So many stakeholders. So, and you have to make the right decision based on that. So it wasn't an easy decision to make, but that was the right decision to make. We were, it was clear at some point.
Awesome. Thank you, Jyoti. It was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for coming and listening.